After a night out with copious of beers, vodkas, and battery acid, I stopped by my local kebab joint on the way home. Having gotten only halfway through it before I passed out in the hallway pantless, I woke up this morning to see that I still had half a kebab left, which reminded me that there's something I had to do. And here we are, part 2 of my Chucky review. Considering his global notoriety, fame, and that Chucky's story is universally known as it's shared as child stories for toddlers and above. After all, it's in the name, Child's Play. Or maybe my parents just hated me. It can only be assumed that everyone is up to date on the story of Chucky. People know that he's been torn apart and sewn back together, burnt, melted, and scorned. People know that he has a gender-fluid child that's an innocent boy or a murderous girl, Glenn or Glenda. Everybody knows that his girlfriend Tiffany was put into the doll of a bride. People definitely know that he's used a new kind of magic to be able to put his soul into multiple bodies at one time. And of course that people know that he's put part of his soul into the body of a girl in a wheelchair. I'm glad that everybody knows those things because this would make this video a little bit more difficult. Let's begin. I've finished the show now and prepared to give my final thoughts on it. And I loved it! Honestly, there's so many great shows on TV these days, a lot of them get lost in the ether, and they're constantly compared to one another causing arguments about which one's better. No, Game of Thrones is better than Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul is better than Vikings. Wrong! You're all a bunch of fucking idiots! Because Entourage is king. What I appreciated about this show is, as I said in my previous video, it didn't try to make anything of it that it wasn't. Had embedded a slight bit of teenage drama, but the drama was almost always connected with that little toy Ranger. Just a quick overview. Jake Wheeler, the protagonist of the story, is the socially awkward gay teenager who lives with his father who's become an alcoholic after the death of his wife. Jake has taken up the craft of making a Frankenstein's monster by building a sculpture that's made of individual doll parts. At a garage sale, he comes across a mint-condition good guy doll that he purchases. Instead of using the toy for parts, he sees that the doll is actually worth a bit of money. So this show could have been really quick had he not figured that one out. He gets a strange phone call from an interested buyer asking about the batteries in the doll, to which there are none, and he gets very scared. Honestly, I've had my fire alarm go off without batteries, and I didn't freak out. I just pulverized it with a sledgehammer and burnt the remains. This girl Lexi, who's the bully of Jake, is a stone-cold crazy sociopath that doesn't have the basic understanding of kindness and forgiveness. She does horrible things to Jake that would make Hitler proud. But Chucky sees this, and after growing a bit of a soft spot for Jake, he starts to train him up on how to kill Lexi, so master-apprentice kind of thing. But events transpire which leads Lexi and Jake to have to work together to stop Chucky. But Chucky's gotten really good and sly with using his magic to transfer his consciousness into other dolls, whilst also becoming a master manipulator and making other people doing his own bidding. There is quite a bit of holy shit moments in this show. There are two people who could be considered the Salamanca twins of this show, and they're going around tracking down Chucky dolls that are possessed and killing them. But I literally had my jaw drop at one moment where you hear Chucky say this. Fuck you, Andy! Fuck you, Andy. The kid from the first movie, but just not the same character, the same fucking actor! 33 years later. To think he's now spent his entire life dedicated to hunting down the possessed good guy dolls shows the torment that he went through. He's a character that is filled with such hate and despair towards Chucky that he has absolutely no sympathy for him. Which is explained in previous movies that he managed to keep the living head of one of the dolls, but he so eerily says this line in this show. I burn him with fire because I like the sound of those screams the most. There is a wonderfully entertaining lesbian lustuous scene that when one of them turns around, it's the one and only Jennifer Tilly. Possibly it's a little nod to the movie Bound. Not that I've ever seen it, but I know the one scene. You learn a lot about Tiffany and Chucky and how they got together and they murdered their way through Chicago in the 80s. Which was alright, but I didn't feel like it was really a story that needed to be told. It was played through flashbacks. If it was going to be necessary to answer some bigger questions, then why would you say, where did they get that car? Why were the cops chasing down Charles Lee Ray on the night that he put his soul into the doll? There were probably some bigger things they could have said. The main thing I thought that was missing Now, I could be wrong, but maybe my attention left when the flashbacks happened, but I think what would be a better idea explaining in a flashback is how did this murderous psychopath learn how to use voodoo? But I can't recall that, and it might have happened, I don't know. In this show, they did decide to go a little bit bigger on expanding the story of Chucky. Throughout the previous movies, he's been trying to either get back into his old body or find new bodies to possess. In the movie Cult of Chucky, we found out that he can actually possess more than one body at a time. But in this one, he builds an entire army of himself to take over America. It was a big jump for the character, but I honestly loved it. Seeing about the 70 Chucky dolls interacting with one another was quite a laugh, and honestly, why the fuck not? Why not have America taken over by an army of Chucky dolls? As previously said, there doesn't need to be a big philosophical question or world-changing outcomes. Just embrace the chaos. For a horror TV show, I will say at no point did I find the show scary at all. But they were never really trying to make the show scary. I think after Bride of Chucky, they realized that the very concept of this little guy works better as more of a black comedy. And by doing that, they continue to make the character great. With the original films, there were legitimate horror movies, the little Easter eggs that slowly build up to the reveal that the doll is actually alive. You just can't do that in these anymore, because we know he's alive and he's been alive for 33 years, so we just have to look for something a little bit different. Sure, there are new characters to find out that he's alive, but the idea is to shock the audience, not the people in the movies. Unless you're a friend, I'm sure you're watching this video because you're interested in views or opinions on this TV show, to which I will say I am put to shame on movie breakdowns by other channels such as CZ's World, who has done multiple Chucky videos. I am apologizing if I have inadvertently stolen any stuff from you, but I'll post it below and check him out, he's actually really good. It was pretty cool that they decided to use Brad Dourif's daughter, Fiona Dourif, for the flashback scenes as a young Charles Lee Ray. For those who don't know, that is the name of the killer who Chucky is. No, it wasn't a perfect show. Nothing is, except for Starship Troopers and Deep Rising. Yes, Brad Dourif's daughter looked good as the flashbacks, but at nighttime. In the daytime, it was very obviously a girl. And Jennifer Tilly's younger self did not look like Jennifer Tilly. It was without a doubt the worst voice dubbing I have ever seen. It made me watch the original English dubbing of Godzilla and made me think it's flawless. Ha 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 ha. But honestly, out of the whole show, that was probably the worst thing I could say about it. Because just from preference, I'm not a big fan of flashbacks. Yes, I agree with Morty in that episode.
I'm not a huge fan, personally, of the whole 3 weeks earlier teaser thing. I feel like, we should start our stories where they begin.
And in regards to the characters, I found it to be very gracious the way they approached Jake's homosexuality, and it didn't in any way seem preachy. He was just a character who was gay, and it felt very organic to the story. Lexi's character, you hate her from the get-go, but she's faced with multiple murder attempts against her, which manages to humanize her, and she actually starts to care about Jake, and they become friends in the end. It's a good twist that all the heroes and the losers switch places in the end. I was going to bring up the references about the Frankenstein's monster and show the parallels, but this is again another thing that CZ's World channel has covered, so I'm not going to steal any content, so check below. The opening credits were not the most creative. They were basically just a tutorial on how to use Blender, but the music was very creepy. The rest of the music in the show didn't necessarily pack a punch, and it's not very easy to find a TV show that has really good music, but one thing that I did appreciate about the music was this tune here. This tune appeared regularly throughout the show, and it is called the Dies Irae, which is Latin for Day of Wrath, which is a sequence of notes typically used to invoke the feeling of death. It's been used in countless other works that you would have seen, such as The Shining, The Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, even The Lion King. To many composers, this is general knowledge. It's a 13th century melody, But if you ever hear this sequence in a movie, you know something bad's about to happen. In summary, I won't say this show exceeded my expectations because reality is, I didn't fucking have any. I didn't know what to expect, so I went in with a blank slate, and I can say wholeheartedly that I enjoyed every episode. It wasn't breaking new grounds or attempting a grandiose story. It wasn't with Interstellar's intellect or Warrior's heart. But the creators of this show managed to make a show that was honest to the character that came before, and it was just a hell of a ride.